Hey folks, this is Asis back again with a Baldur's Gate 3 tier list video for you guys. In this video, we will be covering all of the feats in the game. This has been by far my most requested tier list video, so I'm really excited to get to it. Honestly, the thing that took me so long is also the first point I want to make before we dive into this list, which is that feats are an extremely valuable resource in Baldur's Gate 3. Most builds in this game are getting 2 to 3 feats. Of course, if you're a single-class rogue or fighter, you can get up to 4, but that is a rare exception. For the majority, it is 2 to 3. And there is at least one feat in this game, which is practically mandatory on every single build. So, let's say, this is a very common occurrence, you have a multi-class build that's getting 2 feats throughout the entire game. Your first feat, of course, is going to be that mandatory one, which we'll talk about later. And that leaves by mid to late game, you're getting your second and last feat, and you're probably going to pick one of the other really good, like, S-tier feats for that slot, and that leaves most of the feats in the game in this spot where they could be quite good, but they're just not good enough to compete with the S-tier ones, and there's so few feat selections that they just get muscled out. And the result of that is that it took me a long time to test a lot of these feats because just in natural play, I'm restricting myself to pretty much S-tier feats or above. And I wasn't really testing ones that could be in A tier, could be in B tier. You guys get the idea. Anyways, it took me a while, but I've done enough testing that I am pretty confident with my rankings right now. I will make some remarks if there's a feat that I feel like I would like to test more. And then in the future, with more testing, if I change my rankings, I'll just make an update video. And of course, if you guys are new to my tier lists, I always assume certain rules, and I will post those rules below, but it's very simple. This is a tier list for honor mode difficulty, no reloading, and limited long rests. Pretty much everything I say will apply. If you don't follow those rules, if you're playing on tactician difficulty or standard difficulty, you will still get a lot of mileage out of this, but if there's something that's confusing you, it might be because I'm playing with this higher difficulty and a special set of rules. Just keep that in mind. All right, let's dive into the list now, starting with ability score improvement, or ASI, which I'm going to put into B tier. And this is a great way to start because ability score improvements pretty much define the tier rankings for feats. So here's ability improvement. Whenever you pick this feat, you will gain +2 to your ability score. So by ability scores, this is strength, dexterity, charisma, intelligence, wisdom, constitution. You get the idea. You're getting a total of +2 to your ability. So it can be +2 to one ability or +1 to 2 abilities. Bear in mind that a flat +1 to ability might not actually be useful because ability improvements go in steps where really only the even numbers matter. So if you do a +1 to move from 14 to 15, you're getting practically nothing for that. You'd rather do a +2 to go from 14 to 16. But if you have two odd number stats and you split your +1s to get them both to even, you'll be getting a bigger boost, right? So that's kind of the strategy of using ability improvements. For most builds in the game, they'll have 1 or 2 abilities that are worth investing in, and you're going to be spending your ASIs on those abilities. There's a lot of your caster stats or your attack stats, and some rare exceptions you might put into Constitution, and that's what ASIs are used for. I pick ASI often, but it's a pretty versatile, useful, but mid-impact feat. Whenever you pick an ASI, it's not going to feel like you've improved a lot. You're just getting a small boost, but you use that small boost so broadly that it's often worth picking an ASI. And ASI is really going to be the definition of B tier. Anything else I put in B tier is a feat that I consider roughly comparable to an ASI in value. Now, going down from there, a C tier feat is a feat that is significantly worse than an ASI, so you should probably not pick it in most situations. As a general rule, if you ignore C tier feats, you will not be losing that much in your runs. Our P tier, that's roleplay tier if you're new to my tier list, is for feats that really do not have a use besides for roleplay, which is perfectly valid, but my tier lists are about tactics and optimization. Now, moving up from B tier, an A tier feat is one that is significantly better than an ASI. You're probably going to prioritize this feat over an ASI if it fits in your build. An S tier feat are the meta-defining feats. Often you make an entire build around these, sometimes an entire composition around these feats, and you rush them as quickly as possible. And then for the feat tier list, I have added an S plus tier. There's some feats in this game that are so much better than all of the others that they actually need their own tier above S to express that. So we're going to talk about those when we get to them. All right, enough blabbering. Let's keep moving now with the Actor feat. Actor feat is going into A tier. Again, this is convenient because this is a perfect time to talk about the concept of a half feat. There are some feats in this game that increase an ability by 1 and then give you a small boost on top of that. Actor is one of those. So, for example, Actor will give you a +1 to your charisma ability, and then it will give you double your proficiency bonus on deception and performance checks, and also you will gain proficiency in those skills if you weren't whenever you took this feat. So we call these half feats in the 5th edition and Baldur's Gate 3 community because they're like half of an ASI, half of a feat, right? So that's the name. Actor is part of a handful of really good half feats. You want to take these when you're rounding off an odd number. So if you got a 17 charisma when you started the game, you can take Actor. It's going to bump that charisma up to 18 to get that nice boost, and then you get something else on top of it. And in this case, double your proficiency bonus to Deception and Intimidate is actually very, very good. You can skip entire boss fights in this game through Deception and Intimidation checks. Like in Act 2, there's a particular boss which I find very difficult to beat without taking a lot of damage, and you can just completely skip that fight and get all of the experience if you have a good enough Deception and performance rolls. So yeah, Actor, actually really, really good. Definitely a half feat we're taking. And while we're on these, let's put Athlete up here as well because it's very similar. Athlete is a half feat that increases either your strength or dexterity, so it's good for weapon strikers. And then the added bonus is that when you're prone, standing up takes less movement. I believe it's a quarter movement instead of the normal half, so that's nice. But actually the big thing is that your jump distance is actually increased by 50%, which is massive. You can scale jumping to an absurd amount in this game because it scales first with your strength. You can get Athlete on top of that. You can get the jump spell on top of that. And pretty soon you can just jump entire, screens worth of distance. Of course, it does take your bonus action to jump, but it is very often worth it over just stacking movement. Because if there's an obstacle in your way, or if there is a chasm in your way, you can jump over that, whereas movement might take you 2 to 3 turns to get to the same spot. So yeah, Athlete, really, really good. Mostly a strength half feat for melee strikers. Yeah, both of those going into A tier. Next up is Alert. Alert is the first S plus feat we're going to talk about. This is the one I was saying that it's pretty much mandatory in every build. Let's take a look at it. So here's Alert, very simple. You gain a +5 bonus to your initiative rolls, and you can no longer be surprised. Both of these are massive. Let's start with the initiative first. In standard tabletop, you roll initiative on a die 20. So when you take the Alert feat in tabletop D&D, you're getting a 25 percentage point increase to your chance of winning initiative. That is not Baldur's Gate 3. In Baldur's Gate 3, initiative is rolled on a 1 die 4 instead of a 1 die 20. So a +5 bonus to your initiative roll is actually a plus 125 percentage point increase of winning. So how good is winning initiative? Basically, it is the equivalent of getting an extra surprise round or getting +1 turn per combat. Now, that sounds really counterintuitive, but it actually makes sense if you kind of envision it in your head. So imagine a scenario where you surprise an enemy, but they beat you on initiative. What's going to happen? Well, they won initiative, so they're going to go first, but they're surprised, so that turn is canceled, and then you go, and then it's back to them, and then you go, and it's back to them, and so on, until one of you dies. that is exactly the same situation, getting a surprise round but they win initiative, as if there's no surprise at all but you just win initiative, right? So let's say neither of you are surprised, but you win initiative this time. What's going to happen? Well, you're going to go and they're going to go, then you're going to go and they're going to go. See how it's the same as if they won but were surprised. So winning initiative is actually the same as getting surprise on an enemy. And a lot of people don't realize that. But it actually stacks with surprise, because now imagine a scenario where you both win initiative and you surprise them. What's going to happen? Well, you're going to take your turn because you won initiative. Now it's their turn, but they're surprised, so they lose that turn. And then you get to take your turn, and then it's back to them. But you got 2 full turns to act before they get to take their turn. And that is so unbelievably good in this game, and Alert can basically guarantee that happening. So yeah, I mean, it's just so good. Every single class in the game wants to take this. Oh yeah, and also you're immune to surprise, which isn't as common, but still really good on those fights where you can't avoid being surprised. The gist is I take Alert on every character. It's the first feat I take in pretty much every build, with only 2 exceptions. The first exception is if I have a build that I want to be investing in dexterity. Because if you have a very high dexterity and you take the Alert feat, it's overkill for most of the game. So I still do take Alert feat on my dexterity builds. I just take it much later in the game, because it's not until Act 3 where you start regularly encountering enemies that might have a high enough initiative that they can beat you, that they might beat you with a high dex score, right? That is one exception. The other exception is if I have a build where I feel like I can just get away with drinking Elixirs of Vigilance, which gives you the effects of the Alert feat as an elixir, not with your feat slot. Now, Elixirs of Vigilance are hard to get in the quantity that you can pretty much always get it. And even if you do get enough of them, you're only going to have enough for one character build. So at best, there is one character in my party that's not taking Alert at level 4. Everybody else is taking Alert at level 4. That is how good this feat is. Oh yeah, there's a third exception, which is builds that need the other S+ feat, and we're going to talk about those in a bit. Anyways, Alert, unbelievable. If you aren't picking this, you need to start picking it right away. It is, in my opinion, the best feat in Baldur's Gate 3. Next up is Charger. Charger is going into C tier. So Charger, you gain 2 weapon attack abilities. First is Charge Attack. This will take an attack plus your bonus action, and you will move 9 meters and then attack a target with your standard attack. So it's kind of like stringing a 9-meter dash and an attack together, if the dash is taking your bonus action. So it's kind of like a bonus action dash on classes that wouldn't otherwise get it, except pretty much every melee striker class that isn't getting a dash on his bonus action is probably investing in strength and can just jump on their bonus action, which will give them likely much more movement than 9 meters. So honestly, the charge weapon attack isn't very good, and Charger Shove is probably worse. With this, it's the same 9-meter movement, except instead of attacking them, you will shove them, and it takes both your action and your bonus action. So you can get the same effect if you just dash on your action and shove on your bonus action. You don't need a feat to do these things. So for the most part, I consider Charger barely better than RP tier. I could see a world where it's RP tier, but I'm willing to put it into C tier because, there is probably some scenario where charge attack is giving you something that you wouldn't otherwise be getting, but definitely not better than just picking an ASI, in my opinion. Charger is pretty bad. And next up is Crossbow Expert, which is also not that good. It's going into C tier. With Crossbow Expert, you get 2 abilities. First is Point Blank. This allows you to ignore disadvantage on attack rolls you are making in melee range with your crossbows. Okay, that's pretty good, but when I'm using a crossbow, I don't want to be in melee range, and if someone closes in on melee range of me, probably something's gone wrong there. But, not useless, technically. Then you also get Wounding. This makes your piercing shot weapon ability that you get from crossbows last twice as long. And that's actually quite good. Gaping Wounds adds 2 damage to all attacks made against a target with the condition. So you can stack it with like Eldritch Blasts and Scorching Rays and stuff like that, and actually adds quite a bit of damage to those spells. So getting it twice as long is nice. However, it's the kind of ability where when you hit it on a target, you spend the rest of your actions just attacking that target and rushing them down as quickly as possible because it's boosting your damage, right? And when you're rushing down a target, it's probably not going to last more than 2 rounds, which is what you get on the base piercing shot anyways. So Crossbow Expert is giving you 2 things which are not technically useless, but they're also not very good. Not better than just picking an ASI in pretty much any imaginable scenario as far as I'm concerned. So C tier for Crossbow Expert. Next up, Defensive Duelist. This is an interesting one. I'm going to put this in B tier, probably around here. So Defensive Duelist gives you an ability which takes your reaction. So what happens is whenever you're wielding a finesse weapon you are proficient in, a finesse melee weapon, I believe, are all finesse weapons melee weapons? Anyways, in that situation, an enemy attacks you, you can use your reaction to increase your armor class by your proficiency bonus, possibly making the attack miss. Oh, by the way, it's only melee attacks hitting you. So this is like a shield light against melee attacks, which is honestly pretty good. If you have a build that isn't getting a lot of use out of its reaction, Defensive Duelist is a lot of efficiency for that action slot. By late game, your proficiency bonus is +4, right? And a shield gives you +5. So think of how good shield is, but imagine you can do that without using a spell slot. You can do it every round if someone's attacking you in melee at least once a round. That is mitigating a lot of damage. So yeah, honestly, I don't hear people talking about Defensive Duelist, but I consider it a pretty good ability. I mean, most of the time I'm picking ASI anyways. I mean, it's one of those, yeah, it's just one of the feats that's good, but it gets muscled out just because of how scarce feats are. Next up is Dual Wielder. This is like the definition of B tier because it's giving you almost identical stats to an ability score improvement. Let's look at it. So Dual Wielder gives you 2 things. Whenever you are wielding 2 weapons and you have this feat, you will get +1 bonus to your armor class, and then you can dual wield weapons that are not light as long as they also aren't heavy or two-handed, obviously. So what this means is you're getting +1 bonus to your armor class, and now you can use non-light weapons, which functionally that bumps up your damage dice, your base damage dice, from a 1d6, which is the best you can get with light weapons, to a 1d8, which is the best you can get with non-heavy weapons. And the difference between 1d6 and 1d8 is roughly comparable to a +1 damage on average. It's technically slightly better than a +1 because you're adding it to crit, but that extra crit damage is pretty negligible. So yeah, taking this feat, if you're a dual wielder, is like getting a +1 bonus to your armor class and to your damage. But the thing is, if you just put that in ASI dexterity, which a lot of dual wield builds use dexterity, you're going to get +1 to your armor class, +1 to the damage of your attacks, and also +1 to your dexterity saving throws. So ASI is technically better than dual wielder if you're putting it into dexterity, with the difference being dual wielder allows you to do creative things with weapons you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So if there's a weapon that would fit really well in a dual wield build but isn't light, you can take dual wielder and start using it that way. Just as an example, I had a build in early access that took dual wielder to use Shattered Flail in the offhand on a thief build, which was attacking twice with the offhand, right? And it was a way to get more damage early game, or more healing on hit early game, which is pretty good in early access. That's the kind of thing you can do with dual wielder that you can't do with an ASI. Otherwise, just taking an ASI is better, but they're definitely comparable in power. Next up is Dungeon Delver. This is going into C tier. Gives you 2 abilities. First, Perception, which will give you advantage on perception checks, made to detect hidden objects and on saving throws made to avoid or resist traps. Okay, that's pretty cool. Then you will also get resist traps, which will give you resistance to the damage dealt by traps. Realistically, you don't need this. Technically, it's giving you something, but yeah, it's not giving you much. I would definitely prefer an ASI over this any day. And that brings us to Durable. Durable is going into low B tier just because it's technically a half feat. So Durable is a half feat. It increases your constitution by 1, and you regain full hit points every time you take a short rest. If you're using this to bump up an odd number constitution to an even number, it's comparable to an ASI, but really if you want a constitution half feat, you're almost always better off going resilient, so I almost never take durable, to be honest. The healing isn't that good. If you spend your feats on something that can proactively take down enemies, like say alert, you will mitigate much more damage than durable is healing. Elemental Adept is up next. I'm also putting this one in B tier, probably here. It's interesting. Elemental Adept allows you to pick an elemental type, and all damage that you deal with your spells will ignore resistance of that type. Also, whenever you're rolling damage of that type, you re-roll 1. So it's a slight boost to damage, and also you ignore resistance. It's only the elemental damage types though. Like if I could pick this for force damage, this would be like an A, maybe S tier spell. But the fact that it's exclusively to elemental damage definitely limits it. It's almost never a good idea to pick either cold or lightning, because you can override resistances to cold and lightning with the wet condition. The vulnerability of wet will actually counteract the resistance to wet, which is honestly pretty overpowered. So yeah, on cold lightning builds, you don't really need this. So that means realistically you're picking this mostly for fire and thunder damage, because you can use the Hat of Fire Acuity and the Hat of Thunder Acuity. Those are mostly the builds that you pick this on. And it can be pretty good for those. I'd say roughly comparable in value to ASI, so B tier. Next up, Great Weapon Master. Great Weapon Master is going into S tier. I absolutely love this feat. It's so good. All right, here's Great Weapon Master, the staple of early access. This feat will give you 2 abilities. First is All In. This allows you to take a -5 penalty to your attack roll, that is your roll to hit, but it will increase your damage by 10. Overall, a pretty good trade if you're attacking anyone with an armor class of 17 or lower, but then you can mitigate it by just increasing your attack rolls. So if you have any way to reliably get advantage on your attack rolls, then you're pretty much always better off using All In. If you have Bless, which improves your attack rolls, you're better off using All In. You can really build an entire team composition around offsetting the -5 penalty to attack rolls on Great Weapon Master, in which case the +10 to damage is a massive, massive boost. So that is All In. And then the second ability is almost as good, maybe better. With this, whenever you crit with an attack or you kill a target, you can use your bonus action to make an attack. So it's weaponizing your bonus action on turns where you either critical hit or kill a creature, which is pretty common. I would say you can expect to proc this, if you're playing well, on around 65 to 70% of your turns. That's how often I think I'm proccing it. I mean, especially late game, if you're focusing on it, if you have a hasted target, you're probably getting this more like 80 to 85. It's very reliable to proc this, and weaponizing your bonus action is an extremely, extremely efficient use of a bonus action. So yeah, Great Weapon Master, supreme striking skill of early access, still extremely good in this game. Let's move on now to Heavily Armored. Heavily Armored is a half feat. I'm putting it probably around here. It increases your strength by 1, and it gives you proficiency in heavy armor. That can be pretty good. There's definitely some good heavy armors in this game. So yeah, I think there's a world where you pick this instead of an ASI. That brings us to Heavy Armor Master. I'm also going to put this in B tier, but probably in the higher end of B tier. Maybe like around here. Yeah. Heavy Armor Master, also a half feat, increases your strength. And then incoming damage from non-magical attacks is also decreased by 3 while you are wearing heavy armor and you have this feat. Now, flat damage reduction in BG3 is deceptively good because of the way the game calculates damage mitigation. It always does your resistances first and then the flat damage. So it's the percent reduction and then the flat reduction, which makes the flat reduction go way, way farther. With resistance to all damage that you can get from, say, Warding Bond, and a high enough flat damage reduction that you can stack, you can quickly make damage from attacks go down to 0. And 3 is giving you a lot of flat damage reduction. The problem is that it's only from non-magical attacks. And this is one of the spells I would like to test more, because I'm not sure what all counts as non-magical attacks. But what worries me is that by the time you get to Act 3, most attacks are coming either from spells or from magical weapons, and then you're not getting that flat reduction, in which cases is mostly an early game feat. And that can still be good. Like, I can see a world where you take this. I have taken this on some builds. But, yeah, if this was a flat 3 damage reduction to all sources, it would be up at S tier, but it isn't, so I feel like B tier is pretty fair for Heavy Armor Master. Next up is Lightly Armored. This is going into C tier, I think, probably around here. Lightly Armored is a half feat that gives you proficiency in light armor and increases either your strength or dexterity by 1. The thing is you can very easily get light armor proficiency just from multi-classing into a class that gives it to you, or from your race selection. You're not going to use a feat to get light armor proficiency. I just don't ever see that happening. Also, the light armors in this game are not really good enough to justify it. Like, the heavy armors might be, the light armors, no. That brings us to Lucky, which is going into A tier. I think Lucky can fluctuate between high B, low A, but people in my community seem to think it deserves A, and I'm willing to budge on this one. Let's take a look at it. So Lucky gives you 3 luck points, which will recharge on a long rest. You can use these points action economy free to either give yourself advantage on an attack roll, an ability check or saving throw, or to make an enemy re-roll their next attack roll. Now, if you added over a whole long rest, this isn't giving you a lot in terms of boost, but the really nice thing is that you get to select when it's used. So for example, if an enemy crits you, Lucky can turn that crit into a miss or maybe into just a normal hit. It can turn a very crucial miss against an enemy that you need to kill into a hit. It could turn a saving throw that would paralyze you into you've now made the saving throw. And all of those are really good. It could also be used for skill checks on very important skill checks outside of combat. And in a no reload run like we're doing in Honor mode now, that is very useful to have. Personally, I never take Lucky, but I understand why some people really value it. Next up is Mage Slayer. I'm putting Mage Slayer into B tier, probably here. Actually, you know what? I think it actually probably deserves C tier. Let's look at it. I hate to put this into C tier because I think in a different meta with different encounter design, Mage Slayer could be really good, like probably into A tier, maybe even S tier. But with the way Baldur's Gate 3 is designed, it's mostly useless. Okay, Mage Slayer gives you 3 abilities. First off, 2 abilities will proc whenever an enemy casts a spell within melee range of you. So when an enemy casts a spell within melee range of you, first off, as a reaction, you can make an attack against the caster, which is awesome. Anytime you're using a reaction to make an attack, that's very efficient use of a reaction. And then also, you will have advantage on any saving throws made against that spell that's cast within melee range of you. So those are all nice. I mean, mostly the reaction attack is the good one. And then it also gives you this break concentration ability, where enemies that you hit will have disadvantage on their concentration saving throws. So the idea is this makes it very reliable to break the concentration of enemies. Now, if encounter design was made so that you fight casters who are tanky enough that you can't rush them down, and that have invested enough in their own concentration save that you can't just reliably break it by normally attacking them, this would be a really, really good feat. But that really isn't Baldur's Gate 3. The fact of the matter is, in Baldur's Gate 3, most spellcasters can be easily killed if you just invest in dealing damage. And the best way to break concentration is just to kill an enemy. Also, a lot of casters in this game don't have really great concentration saves that you need to spend a feat trying to break their concentration. If you're dealing enough damage to kill them quickly, you'll probably also be breaking their concentration if you don't just kill them first, right? So at the end of the day, Mage Slayer, it doesn't really have that much of a use, even though on paper it looks so good. Next up, Magic Initiate. This is actually like 5 feats, but I'm grouping them all together. I'm going to put it in B tier, probably around here. So, like I said, it's technically 6 feats in one, but they're all a variation on the same effect, where when you pick Magic Initiate, you will get to learn 2 cantrips and 1 first level spell from the spell list of the class that you choose. So it can be Bard, Cleric, Druid, Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard. The first level spell, you will get the ability to cast it once per long rest. The cantrips and the first level spell will use the spellcasting ability of the original class. So that's Charisma for Bard, Sorcerer, and Warlock. It's Wisdom for Cleric and Druid, and it's Intelligence for Wizard. Now, pretty much the only use in Baldur's Gate 3 for this feat is to take Magic Initiate Warlock, so that you can learn Eldritch Blast as one of your cantrips, and then Hex as your first level spell. These spells combine really well together. They're Warlock exclusives, and they're actually really good on other classes that aren't Warlock. So Magic Initiate Warlock is useful for that. In tabletop, I've seen people take Magic Initiate Cleric in order to get Guidance and Bless as their first level spell, and that is pretty good in early game. But realistically, in Baldur's Gate 3, where you can build a whole party, you're going to have someone to cast Bless and Guidance if it's that important to you. You're not going to spend a feat to get it. So really, it's just about Hex and Eldritch Blast, and that can definitely be good, especially on Bards and Sorcerers. So I feel like it deserves B tier. The big problem with Magic Initiate is that it gets muscled out by Spell Sniper, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Next up is Martial Adept. I'm going to put that here in B tier. Martial Adept allows you to pick 2 maneuvers from the Battle Master archetype, and you will receive 1 superiority die to fuel them. I believe that superiority die is like a die 6 or a die 8 for most classes that take this feat. However, if you're a Battle Master, it will just count as one of your normal superiority die. So as those scale up with your levels, the one that you get from Martial Adept will scale up with your levels. There's lots of good maneuvers in this game. I mean, Riposte is probably the best one, but I mean, there's several. Honestly, the main reason to take Martial Adept is if you are already a Battle Master, because that dice will scale, and you're probably already building around your maneuvers anyways. I could see it being roughly comparable to an ASI in the situation where you're going full class Battle Master, and you have a Bard in your party to refresh your superiority die an extra time on short rest, right? It could be really good in that situation. Otherwise, not really worth taking. Next up, Medium Armor Master. This is going into RP tier. It is going into RP tier. It's pretty useless. Medium Armor Master gives you the ability that all medium armors that you wear will not impose disadvantage on your stealth checks, and the bonus that you can get from dexterity will increase to a +3 instead of being capped at a +2. The problem in this game is that you can find medium armors which are already jailbreaked when it comes to your dexterity modifier. They will allow you to add any level of dexterity modifier to their armor class, as well as the AC that you're getting from the medium armor that you're wearing, right? And some of these armors are really good. Like, they have other magical effects on top of that you want anyways. So if you're building like a medium armor dex build, you'll never take medium armor master because there's just magical armors in the game that do everything it does but better. So there's no real use to take it except for roleplay reasons. So it's RP tier. Next up is mobile. Mobile is going into C tier, or maybe, nah, I think C tier, probably around here. Okay, mobile. This is actually a feat I used to a lot of success in early access, but the state of full release has left it kind of in a bad spot. When you take this feat, your movement speed is going to increase by 2, so that's 3 meters if you do meters, or 10 feet if you do feet. Whenever you use the dash action, you will be immune to difficult terrain, and whenever you attack, you won't provoke attacks of opportunity. Mostly what this is for melee striker builds that want to stack movement and hit a target and then move far enough away that they have to dash to reach you, so you're effectively canceling their action. And that can be good, but it's also a very weird tactic to play around with your party. Like, I often want my melee strikers to kind of zone off enemies from my backline, and a mobile striker is not doing that. And there's just other ways to get really good movement, like with haste or jumping and stuff like that. I find the movement is very often overkill. Yeah, for me it's C tier. Probably the Longstrider bros are going to be fuming right now, but I stand by my opinion that a +2 movement is actually not that good. Next up, moderately armored. Moderately armored. Oh yes, this one is actually pretty good. I'm going to put it up here into B tier. Probably, honestly, better than, like, yeah, of course it depends on build, but I can see it being better than ASI. So moderately armored, when you take this feat, it's a half feat, strength or dexterity, and then you gain proficiency with medium armor and shields. Now, medium armor and shields are really, really good to have, especially for casters. There's just a lot of medium armor shields that just work well with casters in this game. And there is no racial bonus in the game that allows you to... There's no race in the game that allows you to get both medium armor and shield. So I can see a world where you will take moderately armored, like in a full class warlock build or something like that. I mean, that said though, you're probably just going to multi-class to get it, like take one level of fighter or something like that. So maybe I'm going to downgrade it to like here, I guess. Yeah. Next up is Performer. Performer goes into RP tier. So Performer is a half feat. It will increase your charisma by 1, and then you will gain a musical instrument proficiency. Not useless, because it's a half feat and you're getting that +1 charisma. But if you're wanting a +1 charisma, just go Actor instead. Actor is always better than Performer, unless you really just want to play an instrument for roleplay reasons, so it's RP tier. Polearm Master is next. Polearm Master goes into A tier, probably here. Polearm Master gives you 2 things. Whenever you're wielding a polearm, which is any of these weapons, and you attack with it, you can use your bonus action to make an attack with the butt end of the weapon, which is identical in all ways to your normal attack, except your weapon dice will be downgraded to a 1d4 instead of whatever it is, standard. Usually it's like a 1d10 for glaives and halberds. That is not that big of a damage decrease, so weaponizing your bonus action every round that you make an attack is pretty good. Also, enemies that enter your range of attack, which is usually reach range, so like 10 feet, 3 meters, you will make an attack of opportunity against them. Really good to combine with the Sentinel feat, which we're going to talk about in a bit, but just in general, this is giving you more opportunity attacks. So effectively weaponizing your bonus action and your reaction, just a really, really good action economy feat. And it's also really good for casters to stack Arcane Acuity. If you're a class that doesn't get extra attack, you can actually stack Arcane Acuity really well with Polearm Master. So it's great for that. It's also great for Skin Burster builds. If you don't know what Skin Burster is, check out my Best Weapons of Act 1 video. I talk about it there. Polearm Master is great for that. It's really a pretty solid, versatile feat. It works on a lot of builds. I like it a lot. Next up, Resilient. Resilient is going into S tier, amazing feat. So Resilient is a half feat. It'll increase an ability score of your choice by 1. And on top of that, that ability that you choose, you will also get proficiency in saving throws for that ability. So the big use here is for Constitution. You get a +1 Constitution, bumping that 15 up to a 16, and then you get proficiency in Constitution saving throws, which is not only a very common saving throw for you to face, but it's the saving throw that is used to maintain concentration, which is invaluable for casters. If you are a caster build that did not take level 1 in either Fighter or Sorcerer, you want Resilient. It's really, really good. So yeah, S tier for Resilient. Next up, Ritual Caster. RP tier. So this allows you to pick 2 ritual spells from this list, and you can cast them as rituals, which means you can cast them infinitely. Obviously, the best ritual spells on the list are Longstrider and Enhanced Leap, but realistically, if these spells are important, you're going to build a party with a caster that can just cast them normally. A feat is too valuable of a resource to spend on ritual spells. I don't know what else to say. We're just going to leave it there and move on now to Savage Attacker, which is going into S tier, probably here. Savage Attacker is really good, but on a very niche set of builds. So what this does is whenever you are making a melee weapon attack, you may roll your damage twice and use the highest result. And this is all damage dice attached to that attack. So what this is very good on is melee strikers that are getting a lot of damage dice. So that's paladins and rogues, and it's pretty much only good on them. Every other melee striker is going to want to go Great Weapon Master or the other S+ feat that we're going to be talking about in a bit. But yeah, Savage Attacker is really quite good on paladins because of their smite dice. You'll be re-rolling all of that dice and it really adds up. And also rogues because of their sneak attack dice. If you have high enough levels in rogues, like if you've just got 2 or 3 levels, it's probably not that important. Next up is Sentinel. Sentinel is going into S tier as well. Probably here. Really great feat. Sentinel gives you several things, most of them tied around with making opportunity attacks. So first off, and this is probably the most important one, whenever an enemy within range of you, within melee range of you, attacks an ally, you can use your reaction to make an attack of opportunity against them. So yeah, this will just give you a lot of making an attack on a reaction, which is extremely efficient use of a reaction, as I've said it already in this video. Then you get Sentinel Snare as well. Whenever you hit a creature with an attack of opportunity, it can no longer move for the rest of its turn, which sometimes just ends up straight up canceling the enemy's turn. So they're going to try to move away from you. You're going to make an attack of opportunity against them. You're going to cancel their movement, and that's going to be the end of it. It is absolutely insane. It's like a stun on an attack of opportunity, which is already attacking on a reaction. So much efficiency. If you combine this with Polearm Master, like I was saying, you can actually attack enemies as they enter your reach before they reach you and kill their movement that way. It's a little buggy in BG3. I haven't tried in this most recent patch. Maybe they fixed it, but once it's fixed, extremely good. And then finally, on top of all of that, you get advantage on your opportunity attacks, which you're making more regularly now. I mean, just so good. Really, really insane. And it actually creates like a tank effect where whenever your melee striker sticks to somebody, they're not going to easily be able to run past you and reach the back line. It allows you to fight on the edge of cloud effects like Fog Cloud, where enemies want to move out and they'll just tank the attack of opportunity to get out of the blindness, but you stop them from doing that and they just stay perma-blinded. Awesome. The kind of feat that you can make entire team composition builds around. I love it. Next up is Sharpshooter. It's going into S tier as well, probably around here. So here we go, Sharpshooter. Gives you 2 things. First off, your ranged weapon attacks are not penalized by high ground rules. If you're shooting someone from low ground, you'll take a -2 penalty to your attack rolls, and Sharpshooter makes you immune to that. Moreover, you'll get All In, which is identical to Great Weapon Master All In. It's that -5 to your attack rolls to +10 to your damage. And this works for ranged weapons. So it's like the ranged weapon version of Great Weapon Master, except it's slightly worse. Because remember, Great Weapon Master had that you get to use your bonus action to attack when you crit or kill a target. And what Sharpshooter gets, this low ground bonus, is not really comparable. So in general, Sharpshooter is a worse feat than Great Weapon Master, but ranged attacking has other advantages which make these kind of equal in power. Next up is Shield Master. I'm putting Shield Master in B tier, probably around here. So this is a really cool feat. I like it. I wish it was better than it is, I guess. So with Shield Master, whenever you wield the shield, you'll be getting a +2 bonus to your dexterity saving throws. So that's pretty cool. Moreover, whenever you make a dexterity saving throw, you can use your reaction to reduce the damage to half on a successful save and nothing on a full save, which is huge. I mean, this is a massive defensive boost, but it's a massive defensive boost in one vector of defense, which is dexterity saving throws. And it's too niche of a vector for me that I'm going to be spending a feat slot on this, which is just too bad. I mean, the thing you envision in your mind is that you fight dragons and they're going to use dragon breath and you put the shield between you and that massive dragon breath attack does nothing anymore. And that's a cool image, but yeah, it's just too niche of a scenario for Shield Master to really be up into A tier. But yeah, like, it's not bad to pick. It can definitely be equal in value to an ASI. Next up is Skilled. Skilled's going into RP tier. I guess I'll put it a low end to C tier, like around here. This gives you proficiency in 3 skills of your choice. Skills can be quite good in this game, but for the value of a feat, it's not really worth it. And that brings us to Spell Sniper. This is going in the S tier. Probably around Savage Tacker levels good. Let's look at it. So with Spell Sniper, this will give you 2 things. First, you get to choose an attack cantrip. You add that cantrip to your spell list, but this time it's going to use your spell attack attribute, not the base class of spell attack attribute, right? So the big use for this is to take Eldritch Blast on non-charisma casters that want it, because now they don't need to be using charisma to cast it. And on top of that, your critical hit rate on your spells is reduced by 1, which isn't adding a ton, but it is adding some extra damage, which is nice. But yeah, the big thing for me is getting Eldritch Blast on non-charisma casters. It can actually be very good. Like, Eldritch Blast is very strong on Evocation Wizards, for example. Spell Sniper is great for that. I'm probably pushing it for S tier. Honestly, I'm just playing an honor mode run right now that's built around Spell Sniper, and so far it's been really fun and good. So maybe I'm overvaluing it a bit. I'm just thinking about it now and think maybe I'll put it at the high end of A tier and we'll just leave it there. Next up is Tavern Brawler. Tavern Brawler is S tier. If you're coming from tabletop and you don't know about this spell in Baldur's Gate 3, I am so excited to tell you about it. It is so insanely good. Alright, Tavern Brawler, here we go. Okay, for some unholy reason, this is a half feat. It allows you to increase your strength or constitution by 1. Realistically, you're going to be adding it to your strength because of what the rest of the spell does. So on top of being a half feat, it gives you this ability. Whenever you make an unarmed attack, use an improvised weapon, or a thrown attack, your strength modifier is added twice. That is both to the damage and the attack rolls. So on a normal attack, you add your strength modifier to the attack roll and to the damage. Now you're going to be doubling your strength modifier and adding that to both the attack roll and the damage. Now, adding it to the damage is great, right? At 20 strength, that's a +10 to your damage. Right? Like, you're getting a +10 from Great Weapon Master. Now, of course, Great Weapon Master stacks with your strength bonus, but you can see it's like slightly worse than Great Weapon Master when it comes to your bonus to damage. But instead of taking a -5 to your attack rolls, you're actually getting like a +5 to your attack rolls if you have a 20 strength. And in the math of Baldur's Gate 3, a +5 to your attack rolls means you basically never miss again. You have a 95% chance of hitting pretty much everything in the game with this. And that's really, really absurd. Especially when you're doing an honor mode run or a no reload run, being able to predict what is going to happen on your turn, especially with the strikers, is so, so good. And just in terms of math, Tavern Brawler just adds so much damage to the game. It's like the sun, where it has so much gravity, the entire meta revolves around it. Striking without Tavern Brawler is always just worse. So all of the best striking classes in the game are using Tavern Brawler most of the time. Even fighters like Eldritch Knights throw builds, Barbarian throw builds, and of course Tavern Brawler monks are absolutely wild. Yeah, that is Tavern Brawler in Baldur's Gate 3. If you haven't tried it, do at least one run with it, realize how broken it is, and just go back to using Great Weapon Master instead. Oh, by the way, since the latest patch, Tavern Brawler works for druids who are shapeshifted into their wild shape forms, so a Tavern Brawler Owlbear is actually really, really good damage, and by late game they're attacking 3 times, which is incredible. So yeah, that is definitely worth building around. Sadly, I find Tavern Brawler is very bugged with the special Dark Urge shapeshift form. I believe it is only adding to the attack rolls in that form, not the damage rolls. At least that's how it was when I originally checked when the patch dropped. There have been hot fixes, so maybe it was fixed in that. Okay, moving on now to Tough. I'm putting Tough into C tier, probably around here. Tough will increase your hit point maximum by 2 for each level. Hit points can be pretty good in Baldur's Gate 3, but not at the cost of a feat. Yeah, I don't really see a world where you want to take Tough. Like, if you do an ASI into Constitution, which isn't even that efficient of a use of an ASI, you're getting a +1 to your hit points for each level, but you're also gaining a +1 to your Constitution saving throws, which are so good. Tough is just giving you flat hit points. By late game, full build, it's 24 hit points. It's a lot, but not for a feat. Warcaster is up next. I'm going to put Warcaster into A tier, probably around here. With Warcaster, you will gain advantage on saving throws to maintain concentration, which is awesome. Thing is, there are other ways, usually through gear, which you can get advantage on Constitution saving throws. So it does kind of compete with that. Still, there are builds where you'll get some use out of this. And then whenever an enemy runs out of your melee range and procs an attack of opportunity, you can use Shocking Grasp to make that attack of opportunity instead. This is pretty much negligible, maybe slightly more damage for frontline wizards on their opportunity attacks, which you're not proccing that often, right? The big thing here is advantage on concentration saves, which is great, but you can itemize to get that. So yeah, that's why Warcaster is going into A tier for me. And then finally, we get to Weapon Master. This is going into RP tier. Weapon Master is a half feat, which will give you proficiency in 4 weapon types of your choice. Realistically, if there's a weapon you want to be proficient in, you can probably get it either through race selection or just by multiclassing 1 level dip. And yes, you will lose a feat for that, but if you were just going to waste that feat on Weapon Master, you're better off just taking the multiclass dip. So, all right, guys, this is my feat tier list. I think we have a pretty good distribution here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll catch you next time.